All right, we're in. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. Little technical difficulties logging in from a different iPad. Good Vach. Okay, again, we're learning Lili Nishmas, Yehuda Shimon, Zohar Baruch Ben Yeshua, Yosef Moshe, Ayalev Zohar Baruch Ben Yeshua, Adam, Zalman, Neshama Shalom, and Aliyah. Should be a schus for everybody. Okay, so just to continue from last week, I know, again, anybody has any questions, so just post it on the chat. I know, I'm sorry if there was confusion last week. There was a lot of information about making Kiddush, etc. Okay, I'll just review it very quickly because we really have to move on from it. And then we'll move on to some more basic things. But again, I think the part that was most confusing to the women is this Kiddush b'makom suda concept, which is basically that in order to be Yotze Kiddush, whether it's Friday night or Shabbos day, you have to have a meal together with the Kiddush, right? So, and if you don't have a meal together with the Kiddush, most places say you're not even allowed to drink or eat anything. So, for example, you're at a Kiddush on Shabbos morning and you hear somebody make Kiddush, and then you are schmoozing with a friend and you want to take a drink. So you're really not allowed to take that drink until you eat something. So, and if you don't eat something, then you really can't take the drink. Yes, like with everything else, there are opinions that say that you'd still be Yotze Kiddush, but it's really, we don't pass in that way. It's really not preferable. So you have to make sure that when you hear Kiddush, that you eat something. You eat something in order to be Yotze the Kiddush, and then you're good for the rest of the day. You don't have to hear Kiddush later. The basic order of hearing these things, of eating for Kiddush after you hear Kiddush, is the best is bread. The best meaning challah, right? Like in a regular standard meal, you make Kiddush and then you wash on bread. Bread is the best. Clearly, not everybody, most people are not makbid on that, and they'll use cake, right? So cake is in the place of bread. As long as you eat a kazayas of cake, then you're fine and you're Yotze Kiddush. Next best, third level. Again, we're going in order of superiority. So again, bread is the best. Cake is after that. After that is other mazonos like cholent, kugels. That's not as good as cake, but it's still okay. Then drinking 3.5 ounces of wine or grape juice is also okay. That's the fourth, I'm sorry. Then fruit would be next. Fruit would be fifth in the order, which comes up a lot on Pesach, because Pesach you can have, most don't have cake because it's gebras. And then the sixth is the Chazon Ish is quoted as saying that somebody who eats only vegetables, somebody's on a special diet and only eats vegetables, they would be Yotze Kiddush b'makom suda, having vegetables. That's a big leniency, but that's the way it goes. So again, the order very quickly is bread, cake is not, if one is bread, cake is 2, 3 is other types of mazonos like kugels, cholent, if the cholent has barley. The fourth is wine or grape juice, 3.5 ounces wine or grape juice. Fifth is fruit, and the sixth would be vegetables in a desperate situation. Now, so that's basically what you would need to eat in order to be Yotze, your Kiddush b'makom suda. We also discussed that the Kiddush is supposed to be right before the Suda, and really there should be no schmoozing after Kiddush over. After everybody drinks their Kiddush, it should really go as soon as possible to wash. Now, sometimes you have a big crowd, you can't really control everybody, but point is that you should try and go as soon as you can to wash, meaning don't start serving the meal and start preparing things in the kitchen between washing and Kiddush. Kiddush and washing. It should be done earlier or do it after. Although if you are, since you're being busy with the meal, so it's not really a hefsek, but it's not preferable. Again, you don't have to rush and make everybody crazy, but you should try and do it as soon as you can. Many people just sit and they'll start schmoozing after Kiddush for a bunch of minutes. That's really not the proper thing to do. But again, if that's what the men are doing, you don't have to make them crazy. Or if that's what the women are doing, you don't have to make them crazy. But that would be preferable to start the to wash on the bread as soon as you can. Fine. So that's that. Okay, so somebody is asking here, can you use liquid soap on Shabbos? It really depends on how thick the liquid soap is. The hand soaps, a lot of the hand soaps are very thick. So the basic rule is if it could pour, if you turn it over and it pours out easily, then you could use it. If it's thick that it doesn't pour out easily, then you should really water it down, preferably before Shabbos, but you could water it down on Shabbos. And Moshe Feinstein seems to say that you can't water it down on Shabbos, but most places can say that you can water down the soap on Shabbos. Regular standard dish soap is usually thin enough that you could use that on Shabbos. I personally will, when I use that dish soap, some of it is a little thick, so I'll try and water it down before, just to be safe. But Me'ikar Adin, it's okay. Also somebody posted about back on the Kiddush part, if you're gluten-free. So I don't know what you do about eating a Shabbos meal, but tuna and the tuna and crackers will be okay for you. Since you're gluten-free, that would be okay for the at least Kiddush and Makom Suda. I would say for washing, you probably should get something with oats that doesn't have gluten, but that's a whole different sugya. Okay, so anyway, so that's that with the soap, which is actually something I wanted to discuss on that subject, is makeup removal. Makeup removal on Shabbos. A little bit of confusion with that. So are you allowed to remove makeup, nail polish on Shabbos? So there are poskim that say that it's not allowed. Somebody just posted a question on the Kiddush, so let's just finish with that. Okay, so now that's something else. What somebody's asking is, so let's say you do have mazonos right after Kiddush on Shabbos, and then right after that, you want to wash on bread. So this has nothing to do with Hilchos Shabbos. This has to do with Hilchos Brachas. Meaning, if you made a bracha before you started the meal, and now you eat a meal of bread, so now, do you say Birchas Hamazon on, and does that cover what you ate before the meal? Like, so example, you're eating herring and crackers right after Kiddush, and then you're going to get up 10 minutes later and you're going to wash, or you're waiting for guests, so you eat the tuna and the crackers, or whatever it is, the cake, and or the herring, and what else do people have? Yerushalmi could go with a pickle, I don't know, whatever it is that you have, and then the guests show up 5 minutes later, you say, okay, so let's wash. So that brings up a whole litany of brachas shilas. Should you make a bracha achrona? Should you not? So the easiest way out of that is to make a bracha achrona and then wait 15 minutes, get up from the table, and then you wash. That would be the simplest way out. I will leave it at that, because otherwise it's a whole hilchos brachas shir and it's complicated, and it would take us probably a couple of hours to clarify it. So again, if you're having mazonos before the meal, then make an alamichya, preferably make an alamichya, and then wait 15 minutes and leave the table, and then you can just wash. That would be the best way. That's be the best way of doing it. Or just take 2 matzahs and just wash, and then you have no problem at all. And then you wait you could take 2 challahs, two rolls, just wash on your own, and then you'll eat the challah with everybody else by the meal. That's personally what I do. I don't like to eat cake for Kiddush Makom Suda, so what I'll do is I'll wash on my own, and then that's it. I start my meal. That gets me out of all the shilas. Okay, so makeup removal on Shabbos. Obviously, you know what? Once we're talking about the makeup removal, let's talk about putting on the makeup. So there's these Shabbos makeup 7th day shine. One of them is called, etc., etc. So putting on makeup on Shabbos is also according to almost all poskim, because basically you're coloring the skin, and that's a form of either dyeing the skin, or coloring the skin, or writing. But there are poskim based on a heta from Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein says that if it's something that's very temporary, like powder, if it's a white powder that doesn't really color the skin, it's just enhancing the skin, and it's just a powder that doesn't stick to the skin. So Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva that that's okay. Someone will extend that to colored powders too, not just a white powder, a colored powder that will not be anywhere close to permanent on the skin. So then there are those that say that it's okay. If you go on their websites, and you'll see that you have to follow the instructions how to use it halachically very well, meaning it has to be in a powder form. If the I don't know, congeal is not the right word, but if the powder sort of gets compacted, then that would be a problem. You need a special brush. You also could have absolutely no makeup on your face before that. Meaning if you put on makeup Friday before Shabbos, regular makeup, then you cannot put this powder on top of makeup, on top of regular existing makeup, because that sticks to the makeup and then that's more permanent. You'd have to go into Shabbos without any makeup on, or remove all your makeup, which is not going to be so easy to do before, on Shabbos, based on what we're going to learn in a minute. And then you can put it straight on the skin. So basically it doesn't last too long, and it's really not preferable according to most poskim, but there are poskim that would allow it. Sometimes it comes up if a woman has to go to the mikveh Friday night and they don't want to be without makeup, etc., etc. An individual shaila should be asked, but the bottom line is that it is really not preferable to use this makeup, because even if you go with the lenient opinion, you still have to follow the directions exactly the way the lenient opinions say, which is not so simple, because most women do want to go into Shabbos with regular makeup. So then that's a problem. You can't use this makeup. You cannot use regular makeup, powdered makeup on Shabbos. Right? I'm not sure what you're asking about. Somebody's asking a palette considered powder, meaning it can't be your standard palette. It can't be standard makeup, because it can't have any oil in it. It has to have totally oil-free. So most makeups, from what I understand, do have oil in it. So it has to be the special Shabbos makeup, and it has to be used exactly the way they say, which is a very difficult thing. So it's better not to. If a woman has to go to the mikveh Friday night and they have a simcha, bar mitzvah, or sheva brachas, or these types of things, and you feel that you need makeup, then speak to a rav, because there are many leniencies of how to get around it with going to the mikveh. To be able to get upon, you can maybe go to the mikveh a little earlier, not during the day, but whatever it is. I don't want to discuss all the options here, because that will be another shir unto itself. But many women are not aware that they should ask a shaila. If they speak to a rabbanim, there are certain leniencies that can happen by going to the mikveh, we're getting a guy to put on makeup, or whatever, etc., etc. Just, it's important to know that you can ask a shaila and see what to do. But the Shabbos makeup is really not preferable. But okay, you're welcome to look into it, but you have to follow it in the exact way possible. So I personally tell people that it's not preferable to use this type of makeup. Fine. But what about removing makeup? So removing makeup is a shaila, because what it is, maybe it's erasing. We are saying that putting on makeup is writing, so taking off makeup may be considered erasing. Right? Most poskim do not consider it erasing, because it's destructive. You're not erasing to put makeup on there, at least not then, and therefore it's allowed. So basically, the way we paskin is you are allowed to take off your makeup on Shabbos. This could also apply to a woman going to the mikveh Friday night after the meal, and they want to wear a little bit of makeup before the meal, which is something else that would be allowed, as long as it's not heavy makeup, which many women are not aware of, that would be a possibility. But then that would be a scenario where you have to take off the makeup. So then that would be allowed. Now, again, stop to take off makeup for no reason. Why should you get involved in the shaila? So don't take it off. But sometimes makeup smudges or runs, and you need to get it off. So then that's allowed. However, you cannot use anything cotton to take off. You can't put makeup remover on cotton or on tissues or on Q-tips or anything like that remove it, because then you're going to be squeezing it out of the tissue or the cotton. So that's not allowed. So the only way you can do it is you can take makeup remover. Obviously, it has to be a liquid makeup remover, and you put it on your fingers or put it on the skin, and you can rub it off that way. After you're done, once it's a little bit drier, then you could wipe it with a tissue. Don't use cotton; it's too risky. But you would be able to wipe it with a tissue. So basically, again, the makeup removal, if it's not necessary, then just keep it on. If it is necessary, do it, but you need to use liquid, and it has to be liquid just with your hands. You cannot use cotton or put it onto a tissue or put it onto a Q-tip or anything like that, and to remove the makeup, because that's squeezing. It could be squeezing. Can you use a clean, dry tissue to wipe off black under the eyes? Yes, as long as you don't put the liquid onto the tissue, then that's okay. Yeah, so now what about makeup remover wipes or baby wipes? That's another sheer unto itself, whether you're allowed to use baby wipes on Shabbos or not. That's a big machlokes, whether you can use baby wipes or makeup remover wipes. Most poskim are of the opinion that you're not allowed to. Personally, in my family, from my father's, we do use wipes. I personally don't, but I tell people based on Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that the simplest thing to do is you can use the wipes, but you cannot press down. Meaning, what happens with these wipes is that there's moisture on the outside. So if you rub with it lightly, then you could use it. That's what Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says. In Shmir Shabbos Bechutz, it says you're allowed to wipe very lightly with it. So then that would be okay. There is another leniency with using the wipes, in that, let's say we're talking about diaper changing. So again, the concern is that we're going to squeeze out the liquid from the wipes. So if you basically take some water and then pour it onto the baby, or the sprays that many people use, then once you spray the baby with water, or for your makeup or whatever it is, and it got very wet with the spray, then you could use baby wipes, because if you're not squeezing the wipes, if you were to squeeze the wipes to get out the liquid, you don't really need to do that, because the liquid's there already. Meaning, we're worried about squeezing out liquid from wipes if you want the liquid to come out of the wipe. That's a problem. But if the surface that you're wiping already has liquid, then we're not concerned about squeezing it out. So let's say, for example, you want to use the makeup remover wipe on Shabbos. So the simplest way to use it would be to take a different makeup remover, put it on the area where the makeup is, and make it wet, and then you can use the makeup remover wipe, because we're not concerned that you're squeezing out the makeup remover wipe because of you want the liquid, because you already have makeup remover on it. So therefore you're allowed to use the wipe. I hope that's clear. It's better not to use a makeup remover wipe from the get-go, but because we're afraid you're going to squeeze it out. But if you make it liquidy, then if you make the skin liquidy, then you could use the makeup remover wipe. Okay, so now somebody's asking if you have the makeup remover has oil in it. Oh, so this is good. Thank you for bringing that up. This is an important. Actually, I wanted to discuss it, and I forgot that I wanted to discuss it. And this is very important for the winter, with the dry skin and the dry lips. It comes up a lot. The oil in the makeup is a problem, as we discussed before, because the oil with the makeup makes it stick to the skin much, much stronger. That's where oil is a problem. To use regular oil, let's say baby oil on Shabbos, is mutter, because it's liquid. Just because it's oil doesn't mean there's nothing wrong with rubbing in oil to skin on Shabbos because of schmearing. Schmearing has to be something that's more solid, like a cream. So a cream, that's the halachas of schmearing. But oil is liquidy. It's no different than water. Maybe it's a little thicker than water, but it still pours very easily. Again, the rule is that if it pours easily, then it's fine. So if you have a baby with a rash, you can just put the oil onto the rash. Now, if it's an adult that has a problem with their skin, which dry skin, dry lips is very common, So then you would be able to, but again, we're going to get to a caveat here in a second, but from halachas of Shabbos, oil is no problem. So you can put oil onto your skin on Shabbos. If it's chapped or chapped lips, you can use oil because it's all liquid, right? Right. So refu we're going to get to in a second. Now, if you're just putting on the oil for beauty purposes, then that's 100% fine on Shabbos, no problem. Again, as long as the oil could pour. When we're talking about lips and chapped hands, then there's a problem of refuah on Shabbos. See, with Hilchos Shabbos, the reason why Hilchos Shabbos gets so complicated is because you have to keep many variables in your mind when trying to figure things out. So yes, we're saying that oil is okay for pouring, but what about the refuah issue? So preemptive refuah is okay, right? So if your hands are not chapped now, but you're going to, let's say, be taking a long walk and you don't want them to get chapped, and if you put the oil on before you go walking on that walk, or you put on your lips before that walk, then your lips will not get chapped, and that's 100% fine on Shabbos because that is mutter, right? It's not refuah. It's preemptive. You're not feeling sick now. You want to make it that you don't get sick, so then you're fine. But what happens if you didn't put on the oil, and now you come home and your lips are really chapped, and you want to put on this oil, or your hands are chapped, and you want to put on the oil? So for refuah purposes, the din with refuah is that you're not allowed to do healing on Shabbos. I think we discussed this last year, or 2 years ago, but we'll just quickly review it. You're not allowed to do healing on Shabbos. So, but that's only minor healing. If it's major healing, that's allowed. Meaning if it's something that's bothering you so much that you would lay down because of it, then you're allowed to do refuah on Shabbos. You're allowed to do any sort of healing things on Shabbos, as long as it's not a malacha of Shabbos, right? So and now nobody's going to lay down because their lips are bothering them, unless they're really bothering them. But there's another way, which is that if it's really bothering you to the extent that you can't stop thinking about it and you can't function, then that's basically the equivalent of having to lay down. That's called chole kol gufa, meaning you're non-functioning because of it. So therefore, if you're non-functioning because of it, then you are allowed to do refuah. So if your hands are really chapped and they're really, really bothering you, then you would be able to put on oil on them, and same for the lips. In the middle areas where it gets too vague, where it's bothering you, but it's not really bothering you, so then you'd have a problem. But there is an eitzah that the pais can bring, which is, and we'll just use my hand as an example. Basically, what you can do is, let's say the chapped area is here, or by the knuckles. I think that's the more common place. So what you can do is you could pour the oil on the top of the hand where it's not healing, because the top of the hand, let's say, is okay, and then let it roll down onto the hand, and then that would be allowed. I don't know if it's going to make a mess, so maybe you want to do it this way. I don't do it over the sink. You pour it here and then let it roll down. That would be allowed on Shabbos, even if it's just bothering you. Even if it's just bothering you a little bit, then that would be okay. All right, so I hope that's clear. Chapstick absolutely cannot be used on Shabbos, and maybe in this is the Raisa of using the chapstick on Shabbos, as is the same way lipstick. Lipstick is worse because you're dyeing the skin, but chapstick is not allowed. But oil, again, the oils are allowed, and I don't know if they make a liquid enough moisturizer, but if it's a real liquid moisturizer, then that would be okay on Shabbos too. Again, it's preemptive, or only if it's after your hands are chapped, then it would have to only really be hurt. Unless what you do is you put it over here where it's not chapped and you let it pour down. There's a leniency for that. I don't know why it would be marasayan to put olive oil on your lips, as that make it look like you're wearing makeup. I don't see why it should be marasayan. There's marasayan on things that are 100% mutter, so there's no marasayan on that. Okay. Lip gloss is also not allowed on Shabbos because it's usually thick. It's usually thick. If it's an oily, like really fluidy lip gloss, then it would be okay. I don't know if such a thing exists or not. I'm not so up to date. Fine. Okay, so I think we are. If anybody has questions about that, then we'll move on to the actual kitchen on Shabbos things. Yeah. No, but oil. As long as people are aware that oil could go on, it's not going to be marasai because people think you put on lip gloss. Because as long as people know that there's such a thing as putting oil on, so then they're not going to necessarily think, even if they think that you put on lip gloss, but since it's the perfectly mutter way to do it, so then that's not marasai. Okay, fine. So let's move on to one of the most common questions that come on a Friday night, which is keeping the food warm for the Friday night meal. Right. So some people put everything on a hot plate, which is fine. That you do that. But many people keep the food in the oven. And what they do, so there's a few different ways of doing it. The simplest and easiest halachic way is to, let's say this week, candle lighting was at 4:25 around, at least in New York, and in Far Rockaway, and Shkia is at 4:45. So you figure you're going to be eating the meal somewhere in the area of 6 o'clock. So you set the oven to shut off at 6 o'clock, and then you have no problem. You could open the oven door, you can close the oven door, and you don't have any issues. That's the simplest way to do it. I personally don't do it that way, but that would be the simplest way to do it. If the oven is off, then you're even allowed to put things into the oven on Shabbos. Meaning, let's say you set the oven to go off at 6 o'clock before the soup is going to be served or the main. And then obviously an oven maintains its heat for, I don't know, half hour, depends on how well it's insulated. So then you want to stick a dessert inside there to warm it up. Since the oven is totally off, that would be mutter. You are allowed to, when the oven is off and it will stay off, you are allowed to put something into the oven even on Shabbos, because it's not called returning anything to the fire, because there's no fire. Even though there's heat inside the oven, that would be allowed. So again, using this example of, let's say you want to put in a dessert to warm up, all right, when the oven already shut off by the main, so then you put it in there. I don't think it'll get too hot, but it certainly will make it warmer. So that would be allowed. So again, the simplest way to do it is to set the oven to shut off, and then you're okay. But let's say you don't want to do that because you want to make sure first of all, you don't know when the meal's going to start, or you don't know how long the meal's going to take. So you want to make sure that your food is hot. So basically, let's explain what the issue is with the oven, and then we'll maybe understand. Like with all halacha, if you understand the background, then you could understand basically where the different opinions that you hear are coming from. The way an oven works, and many people don't understand this, an oven does not work like a stovetop. A stovetop has a fire that has certain size. You have low flame, you have a higher flame. That flame doesn't move, right? If you want to cook something that requires a high flame, so you turn the flame on high. And if you leave it there for too long, it's going to burn the food. If you keep the flame too low, it's not going to cook the food, obviously, depending on what food you want. An oven does not work. An oven does not work like that at all. An oven, at least most ovens, have. We're talking about ovens that are gas, not electric ovens. All right. So the basic way an oven works is there's one flame size in an oven. The flame size is always the same size in an oven. So okay, so how do you not burn your food, or how do you have different temperatures? So basically, the way it works is that there's a thermostat in the oven, right? If you need to cook something on 500 for an hour, so then the flame will stay, again, just using examples, the flame will stay on for approximately a half hour until that oven gets to 500 degrees. When the oven hits 500, the fire shuts off completely. Okay, now the fire is not on. Then when it senses that it gets cool, the oven, let's say 5 minutes later, it gets cool because there's no fire on, then the fire turns on again and stays on, let's say, for 5 minutes. until the temperature gets raised up to 500 degrees, and then it shuts off. And then it keeps cycling on and off to maintain your 500 degree temperature, right? But the main point to understand is that ovens have a thermostat inside, and that's how it keeps it hotter. Now, when you turn it on to 200 instead of 500, so instead of staying on for a half hour to get it up to 500 degrees, since it only has to get up to 200 degrees, so then the fire will stay on for, let's say, 10 minutes. Then when it hits 200, it shuts off. Since it's only at 200 degrees, it'll probably stay shut off for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, probably, I don't know, whatever. You just, you can turn on your oven and try this and see how long it cycles on and off. Right, the lower the temperature, the more time it's going to spend off, and the less time it's going to spend on. The higher the temperature, the more time it's going to spend on. Right. So again, let's get that clear. Stove top, the fire is, you can raise or lower the size of the fire. In an oven, that is not like that. The oven, the fire is always the same size. When you raise the temperature, then the fire stays on longer, and then the thermostat cycles it on and off. Refrigerator is the same thing as an oven. Right? The refrigerator goes on and off depending on how cold you want the refrigerator to be. If you set the refrigerator for 40 degrees, so it'll go on for 5 minutes. When it hits 40 degrees, you shut it off. You don't shut it off, it shuts off. And then when it feels warmer again, it kicks back on and it goes back and forth. All right, so that's basically what goes on with an oven. The question is as follows. If you keep your oven on, like in my house, the way we do it is we leave the oven on, and it's going to shut off, let's say, 3 hours after Shabbos. And we go in and out of the oven on Shabbos. The question is, how do you go into the oven on Shabbos since there's a thermostat in there, when you open the oven door, you're letting a lot of cold air come into the oven, and then it's going to cause the fire to turn on, right? Like we said, when you have it on, say, 500 degrees, so the fire has to stay on for longer in order to maintain the 500 degree temperature. So let's say it's at 500 and then it shuts off. Now you're going into the oven to get your soup and you open the oven door. All of a sudden, a whole swoosh of cold air hits the thermostat, and the thermostat says, whoa, it's not 500 degrees anymore. Now it's down to 450. I better turn on. So it turns on. Now what you just did is you just caused fire to turn on Shabbos. It's indirect. It's not like lighting a match, but you basically, by you opening the oven door and letting the cold air in, you just let in cold air, which then tells the thermostat that it's not 500 degrees, and then it turns the thermostat on. That is not allowed on Shabbos because you are causing a fire to turn on Shabbos. So that is the issue. Okay. So now there's one more step, and then we could start understanding the different opinions about what goes on here. The question is, this is something what we call a psik ratio. You're not directly turning on the fire. To light a match or to turn the knob on the oven to make the oven turn on, that is called turning on the fire. This is indirect. Your intention is not to turn on a fire. Your intention is to open a door on Shabbos, right? And this comes up in so many scenarios, right? Opening a refrigerator door, opening an oven door. If you have a Ring doorbell, which I don't want to discuss now, but a Ring doorbell, so you're causing it to start recording if you step in front of your house. If you have a sensor outside of your house, when you walk by it, it turns on the light. There it comes up so much with the technology on Shabbos. But the most is a refrigerator and for the oven door. So again, but it's not direct. It's what we call a psik ratio, which means it's just a phrase. Psik ratio means cut off. Psik means cut off. Ratio means the head. Means cut off the head. Which, what does that mean? It's just a shortcut for a phrase, it's really a question. Because psik ratio v'lo yomos, are you going to cut off an animal's head and it's not going to die? Of course it's going to die. The example that is, and I hope this doesn't confuse anybody, but it's relatively simple, is that back then, the kids used to play with chicken heads. They used to play with chicken heads. So let's say you wanted to shecht a chicken, you wanted to slaughter a chicken in order to get a chicken head on Shabbos. So you say, okay, well, I don't want obviously it bleeds. You're causing the animal to bleed on Shabbos, which is not allowed. But you say, what? I don't want the animal to bleed. I just want to take off its head. And I don't care for the bleeding. So the answer to that is psik reisha v'lo yamus. Are you going to be able to cut off the head and it's not going to die? Of course it's going to die. So therefore you're not allowed to do it because it's not exactly like you causing it to bleed, but it's an automatic that it's going to happen. So therefore we say that it's not allowed. However, it's not on the level of turning on. You opening the door of the oven is not the same as turning the knob to turn it on. Turning on the knob is direct. This is a psik reisha, meaning your intention is just to open a door. Happens to be that the automatic reaction to opening the door will be for a flame to turn on. So it is less strict. It's less strict because there's something called psik reisha de nichale and psik reisha de loy nichale. Meaning you can have a psik reisha that you're happy with what's going to happen, and you have a psik reisha where you're unhappy. If it's a psik reisha where you are unhappy with what's going to happen, then that is much more lenient. Again, I hope I'm being clear. You have malacha doing the malacha direct, which would be turning the knob on an oven to turn it on Shabbos. That is turning it on direct, obviously not allowed on Shabbos. By opening a door and the fire going on in the oven is not direct. Your intention is to open a door. Happens to be that it's going to turn on a fire. It's less strict. And if when you open the door, the fire goes on, you don't even care for that fire to go on, then it's even less strict, right? Because you don't particularly care about what's going to happen. So again, we don't want to do all these things. You don't want all this to happen. But as you go down the ladder, it becomes more lenient, right? So the question that we could ask is, first of all, is it direct, right? Is it direct by opening the oven door? Is that going to cause the fire to turn on automatically or not, right? So that's question number one. It used to be in the old ovens. I know I have a lot of white hair, but I'm not that old. But from what I was told, that the old ovens, the second you open that door, you hear a click and the fire turns on. You can experiment with your own oven to see how that works. From my ovens that I have, you can open the door and it will not react to turn on the fire right away. It might take 10, 15, 20 seconds, sometimes even more. Meaning to the point where you could open that oven door, quickly grab something, take it out and close it. And the thermometer is not sensitive enough to make it go on. Obviously, it will go on faster, but it may not go on for another bunch of minutes, in which case that is not a psik reisha, that is not an automatic. And therefore, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, according to most poskim, that would be allowed. So again, if you experiment with your oven, you can try it before Shabbos. You can try it now. Maybe I should try it now as okay, it'll be too complicated to put the counter onto the oven. Maybe next week if that's what people want. So you experiment with your oven, put it on to whatever temperature you normally keep it on, 200, and then open the door and see if you see the fire go on automatically. If you do, then it's a little bit more complicated. If you don't see it go on automatically, then you are allowed to open that door on Shabbos, take out your food and close it and leave other food in there. Okay? So now that's where we get into whether it's nichale or not. So the Star K who created this whole Shabbos mode oven, which is another share unto itself, we'll get back to that in a minute, right? So the Star K, basically their opinion is you can open the oven door whenever you want. Why? Because even if it's going to cause the flame to turn on automatically, but they say you have to take out all the food at once, meaning if you're serving soup and meat and chicken, you have to take everything out at the same time. Again, this is the Star K's opinion. I personally do not go with that opinion. I go with a different opinion, but I just want to tell you what the options are, especially you have discussions with people and you hear, oh, I do it this way, I do it that way. So we're going to just try and do the background of exactly what the opinions are and where they're coming from. And I hope I'm saying it clear. If I'm not saying it clear, please ask me to repeat it. But again, the Star K holds that you can open the door whenever you want. Oh, you might cause the flame to go on. So they say you have to take out all the food at once. So therefore, when the flame goes on, you could care less if it goes on. If anything, you don't want it to go on because there's no reason for it to be on because you no longer have any food in there. So since you could care less about the flame going on because you're taking all your food out, so therefore you can open it whenever you want. Okay, again, we're just trying to make it clear. The star case says that you could open the oven door whenever you want, but you have to take all the food out. Meaning, so they have a leniency and a stringency. The leniency is that you don't have to, you can open the door whenever you want. And the stringency is that you got to take out all the food. You got to take out all the food at once because like this, now what does taking out all the food at once do? What it does is that it says, oh, the fire turned on, but I could care less about the fire turning on, right? And therefore, they say that that's allowed. Now, again, you can't just do this, meaning you can't say that, oh, let me go walk in front of a light that's going to turn on because I could care less if the light turns on. You're not supposed to do that in the first place. If you need to, you need to. But this is called the need because this is where you're going to serve hot food on Shabbos. That's the way the star case says it. Others say, and I personally go with these opinions, is that what you have to do, you can leave the food in there. You can open the door and leave the food in there. I mean, you can take out some food and leave some for later. However, because we don't know when the oven is going to turn on if you open the door, so what you do is you wait to see when the oven turns on. Once the fire is on, then you could open the door and you can leave that door open for as long as you want because you're not causing the fire to go on. It's already on. Okay? Meaning, this is also important to understand. Yes, you're not supposed to open an oven door if it's going to directly cause the fire to turn on. However, if the fire is already on, then you are allowed to open the oven door. Oh, the fire is going to stay on for longer. Meaning, like we said, the temperature, once it hits that temperature, let's say 500, it shuts off. So if I didn't open the door, it would hit the temperature of 500 in a minute. And now that I opened the door and I let in a lot of cold air, it's going to keep the fire on for another 5 minutes, let's say, because I let in the cold air. That is not a problem because that's just continuing what it already did. So then that's not a problem. And since you didn't do anything wrong because you're just extending the fire, so therefore you can leave the food in there and then shut the door, and then you do it again when you're up to the main course. You again listen to see or look inside the oven and see if the fire is on. When the fire is on, you could open the door, leave it open as long as you want, and then it's fine. Okay, so those are basically the two ways. They have the star K way, which is that you can open the oven door whenever you want. Again, this is all assuming, let's go back. The first option is make sure that the oven shuts off, let's say at 6 o'clock, it shuts off, the oven is off, it's never going on again, you put it on a timer, it shuts off, no problem. You can open the oven door after it shuts off as many times as you want. That's not necessarily so convenient because then you may not, if you have a long first course, let's say soup, and then your food may not be as hot as you want. So, but that's the first option. Second option is you want to keep going in and out of the oven. So you have the star case option, which is that the star case based on Rav Heinemann from Baltimore is that you can open the oven door whenever you want, even if it's going to definitely cause the flame to go on, because you have to take out all the food at once. And therefore, when the flame goes on, you don't care about it. And therefore, that's not an issue. That's their way. The other way, and the other way is the way I personally go with, is that you can leave food in there. Again, each one has a stringency and each one has a leniency. The star case stringency is that you have to take all the food out at once. The leniency is that you can open the door whenever you want. The way I go with has a stringency where you cannot open the door whenever you want. You can open it when you know that the flame is on. And the leniency is that you can leave the food in there and go back into the oven later when the oven goes on. Okay? Those are the ways. You can choose your way, whichever way you feel is best for you. And you don't have to necessarily keep one way or the highway. You can do one way one week and do another way another week, and that would be fine. Now again, This is only if you know that when you open your oven door, it's going to automatically turn on the fire. If you experiment with your oven door and you see that it doesn't necessarily turn on when you open the door, then this whole issue is a non-issue and you can go in and out of the oven whenever you want. You can't just leave the door open though. Meaning you can go in, you can experiment with the oven. Let's say you put it on to 200 degrees and you open the door, and then let's say for 5-10 seconds, and you see that the fire is off inside the oven, and then you shut it, and then you look through the window and you see, hey, it hasn't turned back on again. So if that's the case, then you know that you can go in and out of your oven, because even if it does happen to turn on when you open the door, but that wasn't an automatic. Since it's not an automatic, then you can go in and out of your oven door. But again, so you have to experiment with your oven. If your oven is like that and it doesn't go automatic, so then you can open the oven door whenever you want. But if it does go automatic or close to automatic, so then you have there's two ways of doing it. Okay. That's okay. We're already out of time. Does anybody have any questions on that, or I'll just run it through again, just to make sure we're okay with it. Yeah. Okay. So I don't see any questions. So again, let's just quickly go through. Well, let's just review everything we discussed. I'm trying to remember. So we discussed using liquid soap on Shabbos. We said that liquid soap is okay as long as it could pour, right? Then that's okay. If it's very thick, then you should preferably water it down. Then we discussed putting on hand creams. Hand creams you're not allowed to put on Shabbos because they're usually too thick. But oil, which is very liquidy, you could put on, assuming that you don't have any refuah healing issues. Meaning, if you really, really bothered by it and you can't function, then you are allowed to put on the oil on Shabbos. If you're not so bothered by it, that's the worst. And preemptive is also okay. So again, preemptive is fine. If it's really causing pain, it's fine. It's just the middle no man's land there, which you would have an issue. Makeup, putting on makeup, we said Shabbos makeup is really not preferable. If you do use Shabbos makeup, you have and go with the lenient opinions, you have to use it exactly as directed, which is not so simple. Makeup remover, we said, is mutter as long as you don't use any cotton or that type of thing, and it's a liquid makeup remover, that is okay. What else did we discuss about that? Then fine. Then we discussed we discussed keeping the food warm on the oven. So you could either set your oven to shut off before you start serving the food, and then you have no stress, no issues. You could just take it, open it, close it, and you can even put food back into it, because since the fire is off and it will stay off, you're allowed to even put food back. The only thing is, it's not going to stay hot for too long. That's option number one. Yes, if the oven, somebody just asked, if the oven is already turned off, you can close the oven door with the food inside to retain the heat, no problem. You could even put food back into the oven. Normally, you're not allowed to return food to an oven on Shabbos. You could even put the food back in, since there is no heat source on whatsoever, right? Okay, so that's one option. The other option is experiment with your oven and see if you could open that door for 5, 10, 15 seconds and close it, and see if it doesn't cause the flame to go on. Then you can open it and close that amount of time on Shabbos as many times as you want. And even if you do that, then even if it happens to turn on when you open the door on Shabbos, that does not mean you're Machal Shabbos. It's still perfectly mutter, because since it's not an automatic, it's okay on Shabbos, right? Then if your oven is the type that turns on automatically, so we had two approaches. We had the Stargaze approach, which is that you can open the oven door whenever you want, even when the fire goes on, but you have to take out all the food at once, because like this, if the fire goes on, that you don't want it to go on, you can care less if it goes on. The other approach is that you can open the oven door when you see the fire on, and then you can leave food in there. Now, for those that have a hard time seeing what the fire is on, because some ovens it's very dark, so what you have to do, and we've done this in our house, you have to stand near that oven, and you can, if you listen, if it's quiet in the house, you can listen, you can hear the click, because it clicks on. So sometimes you have to stand near the oven, you have to wait to hear that click. Once you hear that click, that means that the fire will be turning on. You can open the door, right? Or sometimes you could hear the hissing of the gas, and that's another way. It's sometimes it's a little difficult, but as we know, keeping Hilchos Shabbos sometimes is not the most convenient. But this is an easy way to keep the food hot for Friday nights. Okay, I hope that was clear. Okay, so is it a mutter way to put diaper cream on Shabbos? Yeah, so you can put the cream into the diaper. Certainly, before, it would be best if you know that a baby has a rash. On Shabbos, you can put the cream into the diaper before Shabbos, and then that's fine. Otherwise, you can put the cream into the diaper on Shabbos. You can't spread it around; just put it there as a glob, and then when it goes on the baby and the baby moves around, then that will spread the cream. That is perfectly fine. If you can't get it onto the diaper, or you need to get it directly on the skin, so what you do is squeezing. By the way, squeezing out of a tube is no problem. I don't know why many people think that squeezing creams out of a tube is a problem on Shabbos. That is not a problem. Smearing the cream is a problem, not squeezing it out of a tube. So you can either squeeze it out of a tube directly on the skin and then put the diaper on, or you can take it, if you have a tub, so you could take it. It's preferable to use like the back of a spoon or a fork, the handle, and you take it and you put it on that way, like this. You're not smearing anything, and then that's fine. That should be enough. Usually that can cover it. Is a hot plate better than an oven or a blech? It's not any different. It's just different. It's sometimes it doesn't keep food as warm, and it's up to your personal preference. No, there's nothing halachically for Friday night to leave food on a hot plate from before Shabbos is no different than an oven. There's no preferred way, as long as the food is fully cooked. Again, I should have reiterated that. This is all assuming that your food is fully cooked. If your food is not fully cooked, you cannot open and close the oven door, because that's going to cause your food to get more cooked. That's not allowed. The assumption is that all the food has been cooked. Okay, another question. To remove makeup, can you use a dry white tissue? Yes, that would dry white tissue is no problem. Because you're worried about the tissue. You're asking that maybe it's dyeing the tissue. That's not a problem, because you plan on throwing the tissue in the garbage. You don't care about that. You cannot make the tissue wet with a little water. What you have to do is wet the skin, and then you could wipe the skin that way. And even if that's the case, we said if you're already making the skin wet, you could even use a makeup remover that has even a little bit of liquid in it, because then you don't care about the liquid that might get squeezed out of the pad. Again, that's the same. It's all the same concept, which is why it's very important to understand this psik ratio business that we explained. That if it's the direct, if when you use a makeup remover wipe or a baby wipe or whatever it is, you're using the wipe. It happens to be that there's liquid coming out. So if you're happy about it, then that's a problem. If you don't care about it, then it's much less of a problem. So by putting makeup remover on your skin first, then when you use the makeup remover wipe, so then even if it squeezes out, you don't care about it, because you already had liquid on there. Same thing with the oven. If you're taking all the food out of the oven, so then you don't care if the oven turns on. Right, so that's a basic rule of Hilchos Shabbos that comes up time and time again, which is that if you're happy with the result, then that makes it much more complicated. If you can care less about the result, then it's less of an issue. So yes, using a dry tissue is no problem to remove the makeup. If you want to use liquid, so then you have to use it really with your hand. But if you put enough liquid on there, then you could dry it, but you can just dry it. You can't keep using that same tissue, because then the tissue is going to get wet and then you might squeeze it. So you just dry it once and that's it. Or once you put on enough liquid there, then you can use a wipe, because then we're not concerned for you squeezing it out. Okay, I hope that was clear. Everybody should have themselves a good tvach. It will be uploaded, I imagine, soon to the tystein.com. If anybody asks or anyone wants to know if it's up there, if there's any issues, contact me directly, and everybody should have themselves a good tvach and a good tiyah.